Again?
I think they're walking off. Well, you know what's.
Good evening. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Roll call, please, Amber.
Commissioner Merck?
Here.
Commissioner Foster?
Here.
Commissioner Nolan?
Here.
Commissioner Lajowski?
Here.
Vice Chair Jagiello?
Here.
Chair Zabilla?
Here. Commissioner Lajowski, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're at the public communications part of our program. Public communications is the time set aside during the Planning Commission meetings for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Bless you, Amber. Does anybody want to speak on something other than the items that are on the agenda, other than the AT&T or other than the tree permit for Mercer? No? Okay, then we're going to move on. We don't have any consent items today, and that takes us then to our disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts.
I'm familiar with both sites and have not had any ex parte contacts.
I visited over time both sites.
I am familiar with both sites, but I am going to have to recuse myself from the item number 2, the tree permit, TP 15-09. I'm a member of the tree committee and weighed in early on last year on this project.
I've been to both sites and had no ex parte contact.
I've also been to both sites and had no ex parte contacts.
I've been to both sites. I've had no ex parte contact.
Okay, that takes us to our public hearing item, the tree permit, TP 15-09, for the removal of one white oak tree with suitable mitigation. We are continued from the Planning Commission meeting of August 19th, 2015, with specific instructions regarding additional information needed. I'd like to hear from staff, please. And welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Wald.
Good evening. So I'm going to try to make this brief. As you know, the staff report contains a lot of background information just to bring the planning commissioners up to speed with the project, since it's been such a long time that we've been working on this particular tree permit. It will note that at one time there was a request for removal of 2 white oak trees. With this last tree report that came in, they've modified that to removal of 1 white oak tree at 813 Mercer Avenue. We did, as the Planning Commission, one of the main reasons that the project was continued was the Planning Commission gave specific instructions on what the applicant was to accomplish, and that was obtain an updated tree report with a focus on the nature of the damage being caused to both other structures, whether they're specifically caused by roots of the tree. And if that was the case, then show as evidence that cutting roots would create a hazardous tree. Provide an evaluation to determine other options to mitigate the damage, and direct staff to initiate an independent peer review. But first, create a list that can be provided to the applicant so that they could delete any arborists they didn't want to be considered. So we've done all that, and the back in the information here is a modified tree report and the peer review report, and I think that the main emphasis should be on the February 15, 2016 independent peer review report, which was commissioned by the city. And that report, in summary, states that there are cracks in the driveway that are a result of the root lift from the oak trees, and specifically the one closest to the garage, and only 38 inches away from the driveway. However, he did not believe the cracks in the garage floor were a result of root damage, but rather soil settlement. With regard to mitigation, he stated that in some situations, roots can be pruned and root barriers installed to help to defer or prevent future root damage. However, in this specific case, if the roots were cut along the edge of the driveway at the closest distance to the tree, the probability of failure would be increased. He opined that the removal of one oak tree, which had been planted close to the other, could be mitigated by planting another 24-inch or 36-inch box valley oak somewhere else within the city's jurisdiction. And I think we're just, the discussion that staff provided for you in the staff report is just the unique situation here that the city's code doesn't really provide, it kind of always assumes the tree's there first, and you put construction next to the tree. In this case, these trees were planted after the house existed by the applicant or the property owner's sons, and they've just grown over time and close together and inappropriately planted, as anybody who would plant a tree would not think those many years and fast forward to what would happen. So this isn't really a hazard. It's not really created by construction. It just happened so many years ago when those trees were first planted by his son. So we think that that's very unique circumstances, a little bit different than what we normally see, where people put construction next to a tree and then they don't like it there. And this was not that situation. So staff has taken all these considerations and the peer review and the tree reports and kind of distilled it down for you and just offered up our recommendations, which is we think that there's findings significant enough to make an approval to issue the tree permit. And we've given you 3 options as far as the mitigations. Require the applicant to pay the value of the tree proposed for removal as stated in the May 5th, 2015 report, or do as the peer review suggests, you require the applicant to plant a 36-inch box valley oak tree at a specific location, or pay the cost of the valley oak tree, including planting costs. It's a little awkward with the planting a valley oak tree somewhere else. It's a little burdensome for an applicant because, how do you go about doing that? Really, the appropriate, if they didn't want to place this on their property, the appropriate would then to be pay the in lieu fee to the city, and the city uses that fee to maintain the urban forest or plant other trees. So with that, if I'm available, that kind of concludes the presentation. I think we're just down to the very last issues here with this tree permit, but I'm open to any questions you may have.
Quick question. What was the value that was in the report?
I think it's in the thousands. It's 13 or 15,000. You have it right there? Tree 2 was $18,070, and tree 1 was $15,367, and I think this one is I want to say tree 1, but let me look real quick. Did you see that? Yeah.
Couldn't find it, that's why.
Oh, you couldn't find it?
I couldn't find it.
Oh,
that's why
yeah,
I-
it's 15. I'm just not sure which one they're denoting as which tree in this report without reading it again.
Oak tree 2 is closest to the house.
Oh, okay.
That's the
So
one.
number 2, then, that's 18,000. Thanks, Matt. So number 2 is $18,070.
Great, thank you.
And, that's, I just want to state that, that's the formula is done right, that is if you were doing the cost of removing a tree and there were actually no mitigating factors to the removal.
And just to note for the record that that is on page 20 of 64, the description of which tree is which. And then on page 25 of 64 is the math coming up with that valuation for that purpose.
Any other questions for staff right now? Okay, this is a public hearing item, so I'd like to hear from the applicant, please. Is that Lisa? The applicant? Are you? Lisa, you're the applicant. Yeah.
Wait a minute, Lisa's going up.
Okay, so you want me to talk or answer questions, or?
Well, you filled out a speaker card, so
Okay.
it's up to you if you just want Mr. Greenfield to talk, Greenfield to talk. I mean, that's fine as well, whatever you're comfortable doing, Lisa.
No, I can just read something that I heard.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening.
Hello, welcome back.
Thank you for coming tonight. Like you, like many of you, and can I address like everybody that's here? Because I don't even,
Your comments should be directed to the commission, but they can
Okay.
hear you, and you're on camera as well.
Okay, all right. Okay, like many of you, Mr. Greenfield and I are fellow tree lovers. We both have a deep respect and passion for all living things, including trees. A tiny example of this might be my habit of purchasing only live Christmas trees for the past 40 years or so, and then planting them after the season is over. The only reason we are applying for this permit is to save our properties and remove the hazardous situation that already exists, and if left alone will increase dramatically over time. At the time that these trees were planted by Carl Greenfield's children, no one knew the destruction they would eventually cause. However, so much damage has already been done to our driveways and Carl's garage, and several roots from the larger tree have been discovered right up against the foundation of my house. 2 arborists have come out and reviewed the situation. They have both advised to have at least one of the trees removed, since they have determined that pruning the roots will lead to a hazardous situation. The roots have already uplifted areas of both of our driveways. This has already caused a hazard to people tripping in my driveway, where one area has been cracked in several spots and uplifted more than 2 inches. In the last 2 years alone, I have observed even more uplifting. Mr. Greenfield and I have been working on this permit for over a year now, answering all requests in a very timely manner. We have already spent well over $1,000 on this process so far. I live on a clerk's salary and struggle to pay my monthly mortgage just like many other people do. Please put yourselves in our shoes. At least the tree closest to our homes needs to be removed as soon as possible before anyone gets seriously hurt or the roots invade and destroy the foundations of our homes. As recommended by this Planning Commission, Carl and I will pay a mitigation fee to the City of Ojai to cover the cost of purchasing and planting a 36-inch box valley oak to replace the one removed at a more suitable location to be decided by the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Greenfield, would love to hear from you.
I'm Carl Greenfield. This is the second time we have appeared before the Planning Commission. We started this problem more than a year ago, and I'm glad that it seems today we have figured out that we can afford the problem of removing the one oak tree. As Lisa has said, we are going on number C, require the applicant to pay the cost of a 36-inch box valley oak tree, including planning costs, to the city. I believe that that's a fair solution to the problem, fair for the city and fair for ourselves. If there's any questions, I'll try to answer them. Because of the drought, the tree doesn't look too good, and the report of your arborist indicates that it is not a pleasing looking tree. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
I don't think we have any questions right now, Mr. Greenfield.
No questions?
Nope, not right now, but appreciate your comments.
I thank you for your work that you've done, for your patience, and your help us with our problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Grubb? Don Teeting?
Good evening, Don Teeting, North Signal Street. I recognize that this has been in process for some time, and my issue has nothing to do with the tree and the tree permit itself. It's just a procedural issue. During the course of things, as everyone knows, we've had additional procedures put in place, kind of a screening process for cultural resources, and it does appear that this project has slipped through the cracks. Not seeing any indication that there's been reviews for that. So at this point, I just ask that the standard conditions be added to this project for the conditions of approval that would ask the applicant to please halt construction activity or tree removal if archaeological resources are encountered or human remains. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Does anybody else want to speak on this matter? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Did you want to say something about that?
I think you can add a condition that makes it very clear to the applicant that he has the choice of just grinding the stump down, and and that's kind of the way most people are taking the trees out nowadays. They're not bringing the whole stump up, which is wouldn't then there wouldn't be a risk of disturbing something, and maybe that's just a more appropriate way to do it than, I don't know how Don feels about it, but, just, take the tree down, grind the stump, not worry about taking the whole stump out and disturbing something is also a second option. This question hasn't come up, but in the original tree report, attachment C or D, depending on which, because it's kind of folded in, but when we were talking about the prices of the trees, it also indicates that a 48-inch box tree was $825, with the installation cost being $2,000. So the installation cost probably is very similar for a 36 or a 40, I think it was 42 here, inch tree. The tree may be less, so that's kind of what we're talking about, the difference.
So what's the total amount that we're talking about for them?
Well, originally it was $2,825, and that's a 48-inch, and so it would be a little less than that because the tree would be a little less, but the installation would probably be the same. So the cost to Mr. Goodwin would be about $2,500, I would think.
Okay. Do we want to say
in lieu?
Okay, right. In number 3.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
I just wanted people to, since you were asking figures, I just wanted to give you the figures.
No, it's important. Hold on a second, Katie. Okay, I'm going to reopen the public hearing. Katie, did you want to speak now?
I just had a quick comment about the cost of the market.
Come to the microphone.
I'm Kaylee Greb, Lisa Brown's daughter, and I'm also a licensed landscape architect in the area. And so knowing that the mitigation might be for a 36-inch box tree, we got a few estimates, and they came in between 800 and I think it was 875 and 1,400. So it is significantly more for a 48 because usually the price of the tree doubles per size or close to that. So I just wanted to
Is that the price of the tree or installation?
Installation was between, the range of prices that we got was between $875 and $1,400.
Well, then I guess you'd probably want to leave it at that they have to provide us, something from an arborist. I'm just giving you a ballpark figure of what was originally in their tree report.
Okay, so your number, max, was 1,400, including the tree and installation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so for you guys, you would need just documentation?
Correct.
At what point in the process would you want that documentation?
When they come in to pay the in lieu fee, get the tree permit.
Okay.
Yeah, the documentation would come in when it's time, when you come in to apply for the permit, present the estimate, a check for that estimate, and then the form.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioner Lajowski?
Got a question for Mr. Summers. How does the cultural resources ordinance actually read? Since all these, or a number of projects, are in process, are we required to condition approvals, or is this just a wish? Because it was my understanding, once this was passed, then projects would be subject. I just don't know if we should be turning back the clock and trying to retroactively apply laws to things that weren't happening. So anyhow, that's my question.
Yeah, so there's a couple points to note. The first is that there's not a cultural resources ordinance. That doesn't exist yet. There is a cultural resources set of policies and then incorporated in the conservation element of the general plan, the interpretation of which the council has yet to issue a definitive opinion on. I won't put words in their mouth by offering options. The next step is there are two policies adopted by council. One was in July 28th, I believe, last year, that spoke to providing notification to the tribe of applications as they come in for projects that involve earth-disturbing activities, with the goal of starting a consultation process. It was intended to go well above and beyond AB 52's requirements. You'll recall AB 52 is triggered by CEQA, applicable projects that are not exempt. Of course, this is exempt from CEQA because it's little. But it was intended, that policy from July was intended to create the same kind of consultation process for the rest of the range of projects. That one applied to applications submitted after July. This application was submitted before. The staff report had the exact date. It was submitted on March 16th, 2015, before that policy applied. Hence, it wasn't routed to the tribe. And the next step in the game, or process, was the December 8th, 2015, the council adopted the preliminary archaeological assessment resolution, which requires a preliminary archaeological assessment, an initial analysis by an archaeologist of a site's potential for having cultural, historic, or prehistoric resources on or near that site that could be impacted by that proposal. That resolution was adopted by council in December. That applied to anything, again, applied for at that point. And it picked up all permits. So it will include tree permits, but again, this one was applied before that. So that brings me to my last point, which is to answer your direct question. You are not required to impose the conditions regarding cultural resources on this project at this time. It certainly is a point to consider, but there's no requirement to do so. I would note, of course, state law trumps the city's power in that if, in the course of removing or any other work done by anybody in the city, and you come across Native American human remains, you are required to first call the coroner and second follow the process that is notification of the most likely descendant and appropriate burial or reburial steps to be taken pursuant to their direction. That, of course, is under state law and is always applicable. But something above and beyond that, it is not required at this time. The council will be considering these issues in detail at a meeting upcoming. I'm not sure exactly which meeting will have that item. And one of the questions of many that they will be considering is how to read the general plan and therefore how to give some clear direction to both staff, the planning commission, the public, and the applicants as to what those requirements are and how the council wishes to interpret the general plan. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. So I would just like to say I would like to look to the wisdom of council to direct us in how they want us to interpret cultural resources. I'm reticent to impose retroactive burdens on applicants for projects that began before this process.
So the conditions that are being discussed are obviously the one that are covered by state law, which is the discovery of human remains, anyway. And what was the other one?
My understanding is that Ms. Teeting's request goes beyond mere human remains to include any cultural resources, artifacts, or objects.
Okay.
And that's what goes beyond state law.
Okay.
I'd like to know from the applicant if they intend to grind the stump or remove the stump.
I think the arborist recommended
Can you come, I'm going to open the public hearing. Can you come up again, please?
Hearings are televised, so the microphone has to capture it.
We're planning to grind it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Does that need to be, does that designated in the actual permit, the disposition of the trunk?
It was in the arborist report, right?
Yeah, I think that if you want to add that as a condition, you are within your scope to do that. To just say one condition of the tree permit is that you grind the stump. I mean, that's.
Okay, I think that's going to be a trade-off then. Okay. If I didn't already, I'm closing the public hearing again. Okay. So, shall we discuss this?
I'm glad we've come to a good resolution on this. Seems like everybody's happy with it, so it's nice.
I appreciate the second opinion that we have because it confirmed some of our questions I had, and it points us in a really solid direction. So I'm on board with staff's recommendation, and I guess it would be the third option, correct? Is that what? All right.
Can you guys also weigh in on the cultural resources conditions?
I think if they're going to grind the stump, I don't know that it's an issue, so.
Okay.
I concur.
Okay.
I just agree with my fellow commissioners.
Okay.
Nothing more to be said.
Okay. I also appreciate the second report. I would like to emphasize the point in the second report that says the cracks in the garage floor were not caused by the tree, though. I see a lot of cracked garage floors out there. So I hope everybody who has a cracked garage floor does not decide that they've got to rip their tree out. That said, I see, I think you have, obviously two expert opinions. You have two trees right next to each other. I can see the wisdom of creating some space, and I see that, we're balancing what the general plan calls for in terms of protecting our natural setting and what's happening for you guys at home. So, and I also, so I concur that taking out that tree is going to be the way to go. I'm glad it's one, not two. And I think that as long as the stump is grinded, I think that, the state rules regarding cultural remains should take care of any issues rather than going back retroactively a year back. So I also concur with my fellow commissioners.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the permit-making necessary findings and conditionally approving tree permit TP 15-09, subject to item C, the third option.
I will second that.
Amber?
Commissioner Merck?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Nolan? Oh, pardon me. Commissioner Lajowski?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jagiello?
Yes.
Chair Zabilla?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you
You're welcome.
very much. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I'm going to let these guys, are you guys going to go? Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, Mr. Greenfield. Take care of yourself. Okay, where are we? Okay. Our next item is a discussion item. It's a concept review of a proposed modification of CUP 1972 to revise the number of parking spaces needed for the 202 West Ojai Avenue building and rezone 111 West Matilaha from PL to VMU. The existing parking lot at 111 South Matilaha Street currently is tied to 202 West Ojai in that it provides the necessary parking for 202 West Ojai. The proposal to sever 111 West Matilaha from 202 West Ojai, along with the proposed rezone, will facilitate development of the subject property. I'd like to hear from staff, please.
Thank you. Before you tonight is a concept review, as you stated earlier, for 202 West Ojai and a 111 West Matilaha. And I think this is a little awkward because that parking lot at 111 West Matilaha is attached or connected, tied to 202 West Ojai. So we first have to, I think the staff report is very thorough, but I just kind of walk it through for you a little bit in that the first request is to consider uncoupling 202 West Ojai from the 111 Matilaha, and it would require that you give a little feedback on the requirement that in 1973 the commission approved the modified CUP with conditions requiring 5 employee parking spaces be required, and that at any time there were more than 5 employees, they'd have to increase off-street parking. So we know that at some point there was some thought 5 spaces, 5 employees was turned out over a period of years that this is an unmanned facility, and that I guess the maintenance of it is infrequent. So I think that's the first issue that needs to be considered, and probably talk to the applicant's representative or the applicant himself tonight about, just exactly how frequent the someone is there, what does unmanned mean, and what does that mean for if we were to uncouple the parking, if there was no off-site parking, where would they park? I can help walk you through this if you were to uncouple it and you were to decide that there was one parking spot required because, even though it's infrequent, there's still going to be somebody coming there and doing maintenance. Then there are some other options in here, one of which is pay the in lieu fee. So they took this straight out of the code of the $3,140. Unfortunately, that has been accelerated, over the years. It's around $6,000 now. I mean, that's the original amount, and it's been adjusted from the engineer's index. So that would be one option. So I think the first thing is to talk about, whether or not you wish to uncouple it, whether or not you think that it's reasonable to require 5 spaces for an unmanned facility. Knowing that then if you do reduce it down to 0 or 1 or whatever you think is the appropriate number, then whether or not to consider the in lieu fee. I don't think that in talking with the applicant, I don't think in the long run there's any thought in the future that this building would change its use. I think it's always going to be what it is. So I think that's the first discussion that we'd have tonight after the applicant gives his presentation. So then I think within the next, so there's a lot of rules and regulations. We try to always give you the context of how what we're talking about here as far as why we would ask for what we would ask and what you need to consider. And then, so it might be a little bit wordy in here as far as, the examples. One of the examples that was given is, the parking ratio that's required for a warehouse. And I think that's just an example of saying, hey, we don't really list as a use unmanned facilities, but the closest thing, a use that has very low employee count is a warehouse. It's just there to give you a benchmark for what the parking ratio would be. Certainly, that's, you can still, because it is an unlisted use, you can still modify that through discussions. So then finally we get into the request for the rezone. I mean, obviously, one of the issues of uncoupling them is to allow the development of 111 Matilaha not encumbered with the parking for another facility. And so that's a completely different discussion of whether it should stay zoned with a public, quasi-public general plan. The applicant would like a discussion regarding changing the land use to village mixed use. We did point out that generally in that area, everything is public, quasi-public in that area. I think you have a map that kind of shows where on attachment A, there's a map of where it is and the colors and the zoning. And I think probably I had requested that you get a zoning map. I don't know if you got that or if you still have the ones you had from before. That clearly shows the surrounding zoning and general plan. Oh, you do? Okay, good. And then I think with that said, we need to if you're going to consider doing a general plan amendment, you need to consider the issues regarding what the pool of land uses should be in the city and where we provide for, public uses if the inventory of public, quasi-public decreases and in the VMU increases, where is that offset? And so just issues like that. And I think I can help you through some of the procedural parts, but as any other concept review, we try to keep it open and with an open kind of brainstorming workshop kind of form so that the applicant really understands where he can go. This is like a precursor to him submitting a formal application. With that, Matt needs to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple more points to Kathy's excellent presentation. Most importantly, to kind of keep the record a little bit straight, to speak to some of the points raised by AT&T in their application, specifically on pages 4 and 5 of attachment A. Their initial read is that amending the CUP to delete the tie between the parking lot and the switching station would not require CEQA review. I disagree with that vehemently. Any removal of the lot tie increases the development potential of the parking lot quite substantially. That would trigger a need for extensive CEQA review. I'm not, of course, asserting what the outcome of that would be. We haven't done that review yet, but I wanted to make sure that the commission and AT&T's folks were aware that the city doesn't see that as an exempt application. That would, yeah.
Regardless of whether it's rezoned.
Right, exactly. This is just to the lot, to amending the CUP to drop the lot tie. Exactly. The rezoning, of course, would also require CEQA analysis, because while it's not at the moment coupled with an application to develop the property, it creates the potential for development, at which point development of the property, either with a lot tie, a CUP amendment to remove the lot tie, or rezoning, or both, development of the land becomes reasonably foreseeable, and CEQA requires analysis of reasonably foreseeable impacts. So it would require, in one or the other or both cases, consideration of potential traffic impacts, general plan consistency issues, the land use mix issues that Ms. Wold raised, also issues regarding the Highway 33 policy, which you'll recall is built into the general plan in the circulation element and the air quality element, and does not permit additional traffic on Highway 33 through Ojai above the levels that were there in 1989. All of these things, of course, would be analyzed thoroughly come a formal application if submitted, but I wanted to note them tonight just so that all are clear that, contrary to AT&T's assertions, this wouldn't be a CEQA skipped adventure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers.
I have a question for Matthew. Matthew, so if they pursue the design review for the CUP, would they by default have to provide us with some sort of plan to show us the direction they were going to go with future development that would trigger the CEQA investigation?
No, they could submit an application just to amend the CUP to delete the tie between the two without proposing an actual plan for the lot, in which case we would analyze it based on reasonably foreseeable potential development scenarios that would stem from the allowable zoning. If they applied just to amend the CUP without applying for rezoning, we would look at the uses under public limited, the current zoning. If they applied for both, we'd look at the uses possible under VMU.
Okay.
But there's no obligation for AT&T or anyone really to present the plan for the land in this case. They can just ask to amend the CUP to delete the tie.
Kathleen, can you help me with this map here just a little bit, just so I can understand? I see the blue, it's a little small, so you have a bigger one. What page is that? Back of 4. Oh, okay.
Why do we get black and whites? Okay.
Okay, where's their lot? This blue one right here? Okay. That's more confusing, actually, because that, so right across the street, across the street from on Blanche, I believe, what zone is that? Let's see, to the south side. Yeah, that's not. To the south on Blanche, right, where the AT&T building is. What zone is that?
The switching station or?
It's C1, correct? The switching station.
You're talking about 202?
Yes.
Okay.
C1.
That's C1, right. I just want, okay, so, and across the street is C1 as well.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
correct.
But, the colors aren't showing that. That's why I'm kind of confused a little bit.
It should be
Right.
red. Is your color not red?
Well, it's blue across the street.
Yeah, the blue is the PL.
It's BL.
That's the
But that's-
museum, and then the parking lot behind it are all.
Right, so it is, so it's so it's BL. Okay, got it. And so,
Yeah.
and right
South is
across the
this way.
street from
Okay.
South P, okay, got it. She pointed out to me. Okay, I got it, thank you. I wanted to get a complete picture of the zoning right around the lot.
In other words, so that we can keep the record going. Your question is, what are the zoning on the four corners of that, of the
Yes, I found
intersection
it on
of
page 206.
Matilaha and Ojai Avenue? Pardon me, Blanche and Ojai Avenue. In that four-corner intersection, the south two sides are C1. On the north side, the northwest is the AT&T Switchy Building. That's 202 Ojai Avenue. That's C1. On the northeast is the Ojai Museum, and north of that is the parking lot. Pardon me, north of that, that is PL at the moment. Those
Okay.
are the four corners at that intersection of Blanche and Ojai Avenue.
Very
I
good.
think that was what you were asking, so
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure and confirm what that was, because I think what we're talking about then is isolating. If we're going to go with a zone change, we're going to add a VMU, we would add a VMU in an isolated lot, correct? Surrounded by a different,
there's VMU to the north of that lot, across Matilaha from the parking lot would be,
right across the street? Okay,
yeah, right across the street at the northeast corner of Blanche Matilaha is VMU zoning at the moment. So there would be
Perfect.
VMU at least across the way. But to the south would be PL, and to the west would be C1.
And,
Okay.
yeah, directly west is VMU too, correct?
Right, because that
Directly
block there
west.
is split zone, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
On the block to the west of this.
So there's adjacent VMU
I see it, I
parcels.
see it now, thank you.
There.
Yeah, I just wanted to see that.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'd like to hear from the applicant, please.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, my name's Stephen Slater. I represent AT&T. I've been working with Kathy on this, and what I first want to start out with and tell you how this came to be. AT&T doesn't have any magic developer or someone that's trying to do something here. This is a standard program that AT&T has, Verizon has, and this is the landline company, so this is not the wireless company. This is the landline side. And the real estate group, periodically, on a regular basis, they look at their real estate assets as an obligation to the ratepayers, to the Public Utilities Commission. They're obligated to look at real estate assets that are not generating revenue, that are not involved in providing telecommunication services, and this parking lot would be one of those. So that's how this look came up at this property. It's very common, it's done all over the state, and that's how this whole things started. I talked to Kathy a little bit about it, and so we've come here with an open mind. We've come here to tell you a little bit about the history of the building, how it got to be as it is, and then see what you think, because AT&T ultimately would like to market the property and sell it because it's not utilized for the rendering of telecommunication services. They have not put it on the market yet. We decided that was not a good idea. We wanted to meet with you first, hear what you had to say, and then submit our application based on this preliminary review, and then talk about marketing it later. And the corporate real estate person at AT&T, who I report to, has spoken with the museum. So we're really keeping everything open, because we get an idea how Ojai works and how Ojai likes things. So that's what we're doing. In terms of history for the Switch building, it was originally constructed in 1929. There was 4 phases to it, to where it was built out in 1972 to a 0 lot line structure. Now, just recently, we worked closely with Kathy, and we re-roofed the building. I don't know if you noticed that. But we hired a historian. We did lots of samples on the roof tile. I think it came out well. And so that's the building. In '73, when they added the last addition to the building and brought it out to a 0 lot line building, they bought the parking lot that's at the corner of Matilija, and there is VMU on 2 sides of it, and the PL zone on 2 sides of it. And we looked at that, and we said, you know, to sell the property at the VMU, we viewed the VMU as the zone for that area, and then selective parcels are pulled out and zoned PL, depending on whether they're institutional uses like the museum and that. That was a correct zone for this lot at that time, and so that's why we're exploring that to be consistent with the other properties around it. When they bought the parking lot, there was a home on it, and at that time, the condition was put on the parking lot to provide 5 parking stalls for the, as Kathy mentioned, and the plan at that time was to actually rebuild a new switch station called an ESS switch. So they used to take an older CO or central office like this, and they would build another one and totally replicate it and transition all the service over it. That was the plan when this lot was built. What happened in the 80s, it was full of mechanical switching equipment. That mechanical equipment was replaced with digital systems, computerized systems. The air conditioning units and those things grew in size and requirement for temperature sensitivity, but the space, there was enough space in the building. And so that's why they never built the ESS. And I think probably there was some talk about even allowing public parking on the parking lot, and that was an interim agreement that wasn't documented very well at the time. And that's how that all came to be. So AT&T has an obligation to look at this asset, meet with you, look and see what makes the most sense for it. And so that's how the whole concept has come before you. Now, on the parking lot, there are 2 little cabinets in the building. The building is a storage building. That's no longer required. That was approved as part of the original CUP as well, but it's no longer used. There are no employees that technically report to this facility. There's no vehicles that report to this facility. You will see service technicians come in. They'll park either in the lot or on the street, and they'll come in for a day or something when there's some change in orders or some of the equipment needs maintained, and that will happen periodically. The other thing on the parking lot, there's 2 cabinets. Those are called VRAD cabinets. Those are part of UVerse deployment, and those would actually stay there, you know, no matter what happens with the parking lot.
You complete?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So presumably everything's documented, who comes and goes to particular sites, and you would be able to provide, were we to ask for that in the future, documentation for those site visits?
Yeah, the building is key accessed, and so there's records of who goes in, how long they're there, when they depart. We can provide specific employee counts, and we've done this, my company's been doing this for AT&T and others for many, many years. These switch buildings have consistently, by many jurisdictions, been parked based on employee count rather than square footage, because it's just more accurate. And we have a caseload of precedents of other jurisdictions that have made similar determinations to determine their parking based on employee count versus square footage.
So you're a vendor for AT&T?
I'm a consultant for AT&T,
Consultant.
yes.
And so what exactly is your role for them, just so I understand?
My role is a land use consultant for
Okay.
them, zoning
Okay.
entitlements. We
Okay.
process subdivisions, we do surveys, we represent them before commissions like yours, CUPs, rezones, whatever they might need. But again, we're the landline side of the business. We're not the wireless, and so that's the landline, as we all know, is a declining business. The wireless is the growth side of the business, and that's why there's been a focus on the landline side to dispose of surplus real estate assets.
So in terms of the future of what's happening inside the building, is AT&T just, I mean, obviously technology is going to continue to change wildly. Or do they force, I mean, because obviously whatever happens with the parking is going to impact that building and any future use of that building. So
Actually, if that parking lot were to disappear today, the building would continue to operate as it does, excluding
about
these
the
little...
parking? I guess I'm asking about if you uncouple, the parking,
Yeah.
your parking backup plan in that parking lot, and you're constrained to,
Street parking is what they would do. And we're not opposed to whatever the magic number of 1 or 2 stalls being retained on that parking lot for their use. That's not out of the question. We've done that at other sites. But maybe I can tell you a little bit about what happens inside that building, what it is. When you go into that building, it's all in equipment. It's all computerized digital systems that route traffic. So your telephone calls are going through there, internet data is going through there, 911 calls are routed there. There's data, there's visual, everything that you see in UVerse is being routed through that building. And the other component within it would be backup power systems. It has battery systems and backup generator systems, so that in the event of a commercial power failure, the building would continue operating.
Thank you.
I want to continue on Rosalie's thinking here. So let's say technology changes completely. What do you foresee in the future, the use of that particular building? I mean, right now, do you see any foreseeable change in the technology that would change the use of that building? I guess that's the question.
I don't, because of internet growth, I don't see in the foreseeable future a change. I've seen these buildings now, I've been in this business for over 25 years, and the buildings change a little bit. What's inside them changes. Sometimes the equipment decreases in size, but when it decreases in size, then it's more temperature sensitive, so the backup, the air conditioning systems have to grow and they take up space. So the building's kind of, for lack of a better word, alive. It changes internally, but I don't see it going away.
Mr. Summers, did you have something you wanted to interject?
The only thing I wanted to ask the applicant, if I could, is one question. Do you have a sense in, say, the last year or 2 years about how many employees are coming to that site to do the maintenance work? Because I understand that that's going to vary somewhat considerably, but if you have a ballpark number, and if you don't, that's okay, of course. I'm not sure if you have it.
Yeah, I don't have a specific number, but I'm going to, guess that it's probably 1 or 2 employees might come to it once a week or twice a month or something of that sort.
I had a question, and this is in regards to the parking lot. I believe you mentioned that there were 2 UVerse cabinets at the parking lot. Could you describe where they're located?
When you look at the parking lot, there's a block wall where the little storage building is.
Right.
They're inside the block wall. And they're, the cabinets you see in the public right-of-way, they're maybe this high, this wide. There's 2 of them right there. They're inside the block wall.
All right. And so, if I heard you correctly, you need to maintain those 2 cabinets. So even if you did split the properties, you would, do some kind of a lot line adjustment to maintain that portion where you've got the cabinets?
Yeah, we would retain those by way of an easement.
Okay.
Which is very common. It's done all the time. An easement with access rights, and those would be placed upon the property at the time of sale.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to compliment AT&T on that building. It's one of my favorite buildings in downtown. I just think they've done such a beautiful job of fitting it into downtown Ojai and then maintaining it in such great condition. Every time I go by there, I go, what a nice building. I just want to thank you guys for doing that work. And,
Yeah, thank you.
And really kind of hiding from everybody's eyes what's going on inside the building. It just always looks the same on the outside, which is really nice.
Yeah, I passed to the staff the original plans from 1929 for the construction there. If you're you might be interested in looking at those there.
Yeah, you did a great job on the roof.
So you're open to maybe providing a couple of parking spaces to accommodate this maintenance service issue that you described?
Yeah, we're open to that if we don't prefer that, but if the commission felt that that was an important issue, we're open to, say, 2 stalls, something of that sort that we would retain. And we have a lot of different ways to address your concern of changes in the use. Conditions of approval can be put on the property that if it, for whatever reason, it does change and there's employees that come into the building, that AT&T would be required to provide parking for them, as was done with the original CUP. So we kind of look at this as an update to the CUP that's on the property because it's 45 years old or whatever it is, that it should be looked at and then updated so there's a good understanding, not only for AT&T, but then the city as well as to what the building does. And we would expect all of that to go into the CUP, so we have a good record, a good documentation of what happens there and what the terms and conditions are of the entitlement or the conditional use permit.
So Kathleen and Matt, how would we go about, let's say, the use of the building changes and they start having employees, and we've separated the 2 lots without considering giving them any parking in the other lot. So, and they pay an in lieu fee, let's say, for 1 or 2 spaces. So what would happen, what actually would happen if all of a sudden they change it in 2 years and say, okay, we've sold the lot, we have 2 employees coming full-time, where do they actually park and how does that actually work?
So the whole idea of the in lieu fee is that the city then, they pay the in lieu fee to us, and that money's that we get from providing, from the in lieu fee, then we look for public parking lots. That's what they're using.
Yeah.
So it's a funding mechanism. So they would use, their employees would park either, as he said, on street or in a public parking lot provided by the city. And that's kind of why there are some lands that are zoned, P, public, quasi-public, is to provide those things throughout the downtown area.
Okay.
So it's really, it's really hypothetical. It's like any other application that we take in. A person comes in and presents what this is that use is going to that building. We don't make them build for the highest and best use or what they may have down the future. We just make them park for what they have. That somewhat always limits people. In this particular case, I think the idea was, can he really justify, for the concept review, can he really justify having 0 parking? And, like we've noted in the staff report, if you think that, unmanned really doesn't mean unmanned. There's going to be someone coming there, even though it's infrequent. And whether or not you want to require them to have a parking space, then they have the option that is provided in the code, like anyone else, to pay the in lieu fee, which then funds public parking lots. So I think it's just kind of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. But we would never, as planners, require somebody to, like say they came in and they said they wanted to build, retail space. We'd say, oh, but if you change to a hairdressing or, hair salon or a restaurant, that's not the way it works.
Right.
Yeah.
Project specific.
Right. There are some provisions in the code where there's kind of, like a basic shopping center where we park at 1 per 250 and it allows use to go in and out more readily. But with this kind of unmanned office or switching, I guess you'd call it, it's just not thought of in the code as we have our code today. These are just new uses that didn't really exist. There was no thought provided. But, I don't know what else to say other than, they certainly have to assess that as an applicant and a property owner, giving up this piece of property, they must have done that analysis of what's the potential for this to come in and have additional employees there, because they certainly wouldn't want to put themselves in a situation where they have to go out and look for something that they just gave away. So, that's certainly something that they, as the corporation, would have to assess.
Yeah, if I could add, if you go into the building, it's not conducive for office. There aren't, windows and things inside. It's all temperature controlled. It's not a environment that's conducive for office space. And the question becomes, do you want to burden that parking lot with 2 stalls that probably are rarely going to ever be used, or do you want to allow those 2 or 3 parking stalls to be allocated towards whatever the ultimate reuse of that property is? And so we believe that the zoning, even if it was rezoned to VMU, there's still controls in place that whoever buys it, whoever develops it, at that time would have to come in with a proposal. I know there's discretionary review on that. They would have to go before you. So the city has extensive safeguards in place. And we would even, as part of that rezone proposal, we would bring in hypotheticals of what could be done on the property to help the commission with a decision. We've done that at other jurisdictions. And then just my last comment is, not seeing these described in the code is not uncommon. It's very far and few between the jurisdictions that have these types of uses described in their code.
A question. So it sounds as though if, let's say you got the rezone, AT&T would put that property on the market and trying to sell it, or does AT&T ever keep property like that and lease it out to someone else?
No, AT&T would put it on the
It
market.
would, for sure, it would definitely be
sale.
sold. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, the only other, one last thing that I would add before you close the hearing is, we're also willing to talk with the abutting owner if it makes more sense to consolidate the abutting, which is a rental, single-family home, a rental property. I've been in contact with them. If that's something that would be amenable with our application, we're willing to pursue that. And again, there is VMU on 2 sides across from it.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
We may call you back up, but for
Okay.
now, thank you. This is a public hearing item, so I'm just going to call up Jim Richmond.
Good evening. My name is Jim Richmond. I live at 703 Country Club Drive. Full disclosure, I'm privileged to be a new member of the Ojai Valley Museum Board. And I'm here just briefly to say that when an applicant comes before you to seek a zone change like this, usually as a predicate to do that, the applicant, AT&T, should be talking to all the adjacent property owners. One of the adjacent property owners, as I understand it, is the Ojai Valley Museum. And so we'd very much like to be involved in this process, not at a hearing, but in a direct communication and meeting with the AT&T and its representatives. Just so that you know, as an enthusiastic supporter of the Ojai Valley Museum, we have plans to be very active in the future. The Ojai Valley Museum is and will become an even greater, serious institution in this community. And we will have a lot of activity in that area. So to see public parking disappearing is a concern to us. So we'd like to have that conversation before you proceed with further discussions about a zone change. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Richmond. Tony Thatcher.
My name is Tony Thatcher. I live at 15275 Maricopa Highway in the county of Ventura. And I also serve as the president of the Board of Trustees of the Ojai Valley Museum. And I'd like to acknowledge that Michael Joseph, the AT&T, did call me, and we had some discussion about this property several months ago. And I referred him to the city manager then, Rob Clark, because, as you know, the museum, the ground of the museum and the building itself, the National Historic Building, belongs to the city. And the museum is not in the position, at this point anyway, of acquiring property. but we would very much like to have it maintained as a public parking lot. We use it a great deal. We also maintain the visitor center, where a lot of people use the AT&T parking lot if there's no street parking to come in and find out what they want to look at while they're here in Ojai. So our basic position is we'd love for it to stay a parking lot at this point. We'd certainly like to be involved in the discussions. We do have plans to expand at some point, probably into our parking lot, though we have looked at the adjacent rental unit that he mentioned that's on the east side of the AT&T parking lot. We looked at that as well, but we don't have plans in place at this point to expand. So it'd be disingenuous for me to say so, that we were. But we would very much like the city to be involved with AT&T, and an ideal case from our point of view is the city would take this property at some point and maintain it as public parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Akins.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Brian Akins. I live down in Oakview. I know all of you, having met with you a couple times in combination with the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm also a 7-year member of our trustee for the museum and the treasurer. Just a couple points. When this permit, when the change was made back in 1972, we've talked about the parking spaces. We've talked very little about the requirement that it provide public parking. In fact, if you look through the 56 pages of your attachment that I was reading on my iPhone on the balcony in Tahoe last week, you'll see that when AT&T or whoever was at the time first put it in, they put private parking. There was quite a scandal that said, hey, no, that's not private parking, that's public parking for everybody but except for those 5 spaces. So again, from its inception, it was meant to provide public parking to those facilities that needed that kind of space for events. Our museum is, of course, one of those spaces. We use that parking lot frequently. In fact, I think my previous speaker has on numerous times hauled off palm fronds that have fallen on that parking lot to his ranch to be disposed of. So we have watched that. We have taken care of it. We do see telephone employees that come in there, 1, 2, 3 different vehicles that are parked in that area. Again, you could go to the card access and find out how frequently that takes place, but again, I see it frequently. When I'm there, I live down in Oakview. I don't come into Ojai every day, but oftentimes I do see the people from the telephone company there. So again, it has a benefit other than the parking, a live, current, usable benefit that we enjoy, that we take advantage of. Parking is very hard to find in that section. As in most of Ojai, there aren't many large parking lots. We appreciate that. One other thing I'd like to close with, since it's mentioned in the 56 pages and been mentioned here numerous times, I would ask Chair Zabilla if you had 3 trees, 1929, another one in between, and 1972 displayed on Ojai Avenue, that it was on the Historic Trees of Merit list, and one day you came and those trees had been replaced, you might be a bit upset. As I was the day I came to a Finance Committee meeting and looked over and saw tiles that dated back to the original building of 1929 being thrown in the trash. So again, that was a decision. The city had been aware of that for a number of months. It was a decision made that did not need to be brought before the HPC, even though it was a historic site of merit. So I take a little bit of umbrage. They did do a good job in replacing it, but again, 1929 tiles being thrown off the roof into a large trash container gets me fired up.
I don't believe I weighed in on that.
Oh, no, you were just, as I would be too, complimenting the roof design.
Oh, yeah.
And again,
right.
it's mentioned in the report that took place. The gentleman representing
see what you're
AT&T
saying.
said, we came here, we talked to the city, we
See.
hired a local historic consultant. We did everything right, they did, but again, it never came before the HPC.
I understand what you're saying.
Thank you very much.
Don Teeting.
Good evening, Dawn Teeting. I'm here actually representing, I'm on staff with the Ojai Valley Museum. And so I see the parking situation every day, both on a daily basis during the weekdays and also when we have events at the museum. And we have very little parking. I actually park out on the street because the parking in the back is already impacted. So on a daily basis, we have staff, contractors, service personnel, cleaning staff, volunteers, and then add in visitors to the mix. So I typically advise people to park on the street if there is no parking in the back. But that lot that AT&T has is the only lot that I know of in the area that does provide or can provide public parking for the museum. So I'm very concerned that that's just on a daily basis, but then we also have event parking where the museum may have town talks or special events where we have 60 to 70 people coming to the museum. And there just isn't enough parking right now, especially if we lose that lot. On a daily basis, I also do see AT&T vehicles, and oftentimes they're actually parked on Blanche Street, directly across from the museum, with cones on either side. So that adds to our parking dilemma with where we're at. So because of that reason, I would really urge the city to continue this as a public zone property and actually to consider purchasing the parking lot, if that's possible, for continued public use. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a I'm going to close public hearing. Discussion item. I'm closing the discussion item. Okay, so, Mr. Slater?
Just respond to one of the comments, just for your
Sure.
information before. Just on the tiles, I just want to make sure you know that we went through that in detail with the contract. They did save a number of the tiles.
They did at my request.
No, at my request.
Oh, okay.
Before you were even involved, they saved tiles. That
Saved.
was part of our agreement with the city to save some tiles.
I
so
never
we did do
followed
that.
you, but
Yeah.
however, the tiles that were saved at my request.
Yeah.
The tiles that ended up.
Okay, we guys, we can't have this
Just so you
discussion
know,
here.
there are tiles that were saved. We jointly saved some tiles.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Ms. Wold.
I just want to explain this whole situation because I'm sorry, what? Okay, that's fine. If Matt doesn't want me to say anything, but I just want to explain that for clarification purposes, every rule was followed. It's a ministerial building permit, sites of merit, not a landmark. So just want to, if there's any
Okay.
clarification on that, that's the situation.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay, so we have two things before us. One is the parking piece, and one is the zoning, the rezone. I feel like I can summarize my thoughts on this subject as a whole, but we can split it apart if you wish.
Why don't you comprehensively summarize?
I will comprehensively sum up my
Of my-
opinion. As far as the parking, we sort of have this threshold of 9. I think that obviously to see a lot fewer than 9, we'd be looking for the applicant to provide the documentation of when and where and how many and whatnot, which would obviously be the basis for our decision for fewer parking spaces, and make a determination at that point on how many are actually needed when we see the documentation. As far as the rezone goes, I personally am not in favor of spot zoning for, to increase somebody's property values. Even though that's not a precedent, doesn't set precedent, I think that's not in the best interests of the city, especially in this case where we do have a great parking lot that would be perhaps even a better parking lot. So In that sense, I'm not particularly in favor of the rezone.
I'd like to understand a little bit better on the PL zone, and something was said here where that's the public parking aspect of it on private property. Okay, can you explain that, Matt, how that works? I mean, what right does a private...
I can give an answer to your question. The caveat is that I haven't fully dived into all of the underlying approvals dating back to the 20s on this project. So there's your caveat. But as I understand it, there was discussion in the 72 approval regarding the use of the lot for public parking. My understanding is that that wasn't captured in the conditions for that approval. But over the last 44 years, AT&T has certainly acquiesced in the use of the lot for public parking, which could create a prescriptive easement in favor of the public. I'm not saying one exists, depending on the facts, of course, and further analysis would have to be done. It certainly is used as a public parking lot. Which is always a viable option on private property under the right circumstances. At the moment, it appears to be a matter of it's been used as such. AT&T has allowed it to be used as such. The exact underpinning requires further detailed analysis. I hope that's sufficient for your question at the moment.
So I'll just also offer that often when a person has a parking lot like this in other cities and other jurisdictions, they enter into an agreement with the city and the city pays them money to use that as public park. That's often done too.
Is that being done in this case?
No.
Okay. So does this lot, do they have any right to maintain it as a public parking lot?
Do they have any obligation?
The obligation.
I think that Matt and I are both trying to say to you that a full analysis of that, at first blush, it's looking like there was mention of it, but no formal obligation. But he's saying he wants to read it all.
Right. Well, and with regard to the prescriptive easement, such a right may exist in favor of the public. Prescriptive easements exist only upon adjudication by a court in favor of the public, but the facts may exist to create one in this case. That has to be fully vetted. So the answer is, in short, it is uncertain.
Well, no, I want to hear what everyone else has to say.
I'll make a comment. Well, number one, I do agree, Matt, Mr. Summers brought this up at the beginning, that CEQA should be required. And it sounds like we need a little more information. We need information on the amount of employees and how often they come to service the station, once again, as far as the parking goes. And I feel like I need a little more information. I mean, I know we're just still discussing this. But I would like to find out more information on the parking lot, if somewhere in the paperwork there was an agreement or not, because it sounds like it's important to the local, especially the museum. I mean, they've been using it all these years. So at this point, I'm not sure that I want to make an offer or a decision, even though it's a discussion on whether they should maintain it as a parking lot in the zoning or not. I just feel like I need a little more information.
Yeah, that's what was exactly my point. I really think that this issue of the zone of the public parking needs to be resolved for us to really separate it out, or to consider separating it out from the existing CUP and conditions that are set right now on the other property. How could we, if it's...
Am I understanding you correctly? You think that you can't even address the CUP portion of it because you're thinking that you're unwilling to deal with the unmanned portion part of whether or not it's tied?
They seem to be tied together in a kind of a strange way, because it's being used for parking. It's designated parking right now. And so therefore it's somewhat, because of that designation, the public has been using it. AT&T has been acquiescing the use of it as a public parking lot. But what they're saying is they now want to sell that lot. So where does that, if we remove their parking requirement, that also changes the use of that particular site, correct?
It changes Removing the requirement changes the possible uses of the site. It doesn't change the uses the next day. It gives AT&T full flexibility to use it without the lot tie.
Right. But they're required to use it as parking right now.
Right, and the key, of course, is they're definitively required to use it as parking for their building. The uncertain answer is whether it's also required for public parking.
Right.
But
And
changing it, sorry, carry on.
And what I'm hearing is that and this is why we have concept reviews. It allows us to suss out the key questions to be
Right.
answered, and that's one of the key questions to be answered.
Yeah, it is, for me.
I guess the point is that, in my mind, is that retaining that zoning is how to retain the park as a potential parking lot.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to rezone it to VMU, that goes away. That parking will go away. It'll be developed by somebody privately for their own purposes. So, I mean, that's kind of the point of keeping the PL, the P zoning is that, perhaps the city could buy that lot and make it public parking, if the museum couldn't acquire it. So, I'm just, that's where my head's going.
It was interesting for me when I visited the property and I saw the fenced-in storage building, and then I started looking at the map and realizing it included what looked like a public parking area there. And I didn't understand that because I didn't know that the city had an additional public parking, but yet it was, the signage is up, looks very much like public parking, and obviously that's the use that's taken place there. So there was questions that immediately come up for me in that regard, and I was curious about our policy, and I can.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. What signage? There's a sign on it
Well,
that says
they
it's a
have
public parking
some
lot?
parking hours, some stand-up posts with hours for parking. It's like that match our street signs. No overnight parking between the hours of 12 and 6 a.m.
Oh, but there's nothing noting it as public parking?
No, I'm not
Okay.
saying that. I'm just saying that there was some signage there that was placed in front of the stalls, which led to the impression this is definitely a public parking area, which I didn't even know existed until I walked into the driveway there. And it was well-maintained and kept, and I think some neighbors were using it, and what's going on there. Prior to that, I was thinking, there is adjacent VMU use. I like the idea of office and commercial combined, mixed-use space. But what I didn't know was how dependent it appears that the museum is on that parking, for that space for their parking. It seems to be a major component of what is going on there. So, like everybody else, I think we need more answers to the questions to really dive into this a little deeper to make a adequate decision.
Well, as the applicant indicated, when I first talked to him, one of the first things that I encouraged him to do was to reach out to museum. That was the very first. That's why they've had these conversations they've had. But, this is just to flesh out what you need to keep in mind that you're going to be giving him constructive criticism on what he needs to go forward with. And so, that's kind of the issue. And one of the first things he was doing was having conversations with the museum, so they know where they stand, and the AT&T knows where they stand with it. But again, we can talk about the number of employees and uncoupling, but if the major issue is whether or not there's a prescriptive easement on that property, I think that's a rather hard question to answer easily.
We would need, that would require a fair amount more factual development.
I mean, I don't think we're going down that road, are we? I mean.
Say that again, Matt.
It's enormously complicated.
It would require a fair amount more factual development, and then in the end, a lawsuit. I don't have any sense that anyone wants to litigate anything near this, but I note it as a possibility.
Right, I just think it's really important when people talk about these terms, they talk about them sort of anecdotally. Oh, you must have, I cross over there all the time. That gives me this right. As Matt said, it has to be adjudicated. I mean, you're talking lawsuits. It's
No,
not,
I know.
it's
I hear
not-
this every day.
Okay.
Oh, well, no, you can't do that.
I'm sure you do hear it every day. So I just wanted everybody to understand that that's a whole different
Can of
long
worms.
process.
Yeah. John?
I don't really have a lot to add. I think we need more information from AT&T about how often that site is used. And when I initially looked at this, I thought, well, it should be easy to uncouple the CUP from those two properties. But after listening to all the discussion, I think the two things are really actually tied together. So I think we're going to have to look at that as a whole and perhaps modify the CUP, but not necessarily change any of the zoning or anything like that.
It does say in the Planning Commission minutes of 1973 that those minimum 5 parking spaces shall be maintained for utilization by the telephone company and so be identified. So they would be restricted from that. I don't think that's been done either. I mean, this is a lot of years ago. So, you know, I think that there's probably some of these conditions in here that really haven't been adhered to over a long period of time.
Yep.
So can we wrap it up and give them some kind of ideas of what
Yeah,
we want
I think
them
we
to
just want to
do?
hear from Commissioner Lajowski, and then we're
Oh,
going to
sorry.
summarize.
Sorry, Matt.
I think the only thing I would just be concerned about is what if AT&T decided to relocate one of their helpful call centers to that building? You know, we might have 24 employees taking phone calls in there. What protections would there be about the parking? I do believe AT&T has the right to, you know, sell and develop that lot as they see fit. I'd be open to, you know, considering a zone change, although changing zoning is very difficult to do, and I do think that it would be a hearty conversation whether this is spot zoning or not. But I think it's worth a try. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, so I think obviously number one would be documentation, full documentation for trips made and number of people making them and how often and whatnot. Further conversations with the board at the museum or whomever. And we'll get obviously some more background information in terms of how the public parking does exist right now. Anything else?
Can I just add to that, the conditions, I know this is really faint in the packet.
It's hard to read.
It's hard to read, but it does say the conditions right now for the use permit are prior to construction, a landscaping plan with sprinklers, et cetera, it goes, a minimum of 5 spaces isn't identified. No more than 5 employees will be allowed without an increase in the amount of off-street parking. So if you were to instruct the applicant that you're going to modify the CUP, you would be modifying 4 and 5, and that would be saying no more than whatever, 1 infrequent, that you would give a descriptor to that. And then that would require, that's the protections that Commissioner Lajowski was talking about. That's already in the use permit. The number's 5 currently because there's 5. It actually says, said increase shall be at the ratio of 1 parking space for every 2 employees. So it's 1 to 1 first and then 1 to 2 afterwards. And that's the statement that then you would change to give yourself that comfort that if they increased the frequency of the infrequent use of that then that would kick it in. That right there, already written into the use permit, you'd be modifying.
Thank you, that's helpful. It's sort of like a Zen riddle. How many parking spaces for an unmanned building? Okay. I think, anything else, Mr. Slater, did you want to add anything else? Is that clear to you? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then I think we're going to move on. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, so director report and director actions?
This is real brief. We just had one hazardous oak tree removal and replace windows and awnings, repair staircase at 321 East Ojai Avenue. And then the next issue is the code enforcement update. And I think we're trying to simplify this, but it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Change directions.
Yeah. We've got some new staff. People like to be creative. Oh, not Amber, no. And then finally she is creative, but yes. But then the next one is the future agenda items, and that is just the second unit residential ordinance update coming up, and for next April 20th. I believe that we're still, you have a question?
Well, about that issue. Yeah, about that issue right there. I think what we were hoping for is, that's the tiny home thing. I know we have other things to talk about on the residential ordinance, but we did pass that. We were hoping that the city council would hear that prior to that April 20th meeting. So that has not been agendized, as I know right now from the city council. And I wanted to have the full, all the information so we can have a productive meeting. That's what I'm saying.
So am I to gather from what you're saying that you'd prefer us skip the April 20th meeting?
Yes, I prefer us move that April 20th meeting until the city council has time to agendize.
That's fine. I mean, that's for you.
I'd rather
Yeah,
have
I
all the
mean,
information.
sure, that's fine. I mean, do we, I think there's other issues anyway with
Yeah.
that. Do we have anything else to put on the calendar?
Well, we were going to, Matt is going to be giving like a Brown Act and some training in May, but I don't think we can move it up.
I thought I was giving that training for the HBC next week.
Well, for Planning Commission too, when they
Oh,
have their
I'm doing
new,
it for planning commission as well.
when they
Right,
have their new
when
member. That's really all we have
Although
is.
I thought the consultant was coming to talk to us about the general plan, anyway. The housing element specifically.
Well,
I mean, we don't have to, in other words, we can come and do something. And
Well, I got a possible suggestion.
go ahead.
Well, it depends on what we want to do with the second unit ordinance. We may want to use that time to decide what information we need from the city council. Because you're concerned about the water issue. It will help us organize our thoughts, because I think I have some clarifications that I would like the city council to give us, so that when they have their meeting, they consider all those things. So when we get it back from them, we got clear direction, and we're not like arguing amongst ourselves what we should or should not be doing. So maybe we should keep it there, but with that intention, not to finalize the ordinance, but to
Further the discussion.
just further the discussion to outline our
Okay.
inquiry to the city council, so when they have their meeting, they have our outline. What do you think of that?
I think that's fine. I think that, I don't see that, does that feel like a burden to staff?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
So I think that's a good idea. And I know we talked about that. I don't know if that was having the fellow who came and consulted on the housing element before. Can we see if I thought he was going to come.
That is what we had talked about, and I can see if he can come.
Okay.
Again, I'm just getting a little concerned that I'm not quite clear on what you're wanting him to present on, because originally it was on some issues, if I remember correctly, it was some issues that you had regarding the arena and whether you had to build the arena and how the second units fit into the issues. So there are some things.
Constraints.
Okay.
How
So there are some
constraints.
things that staff can do, and just want to make sure that we're using the time wisely, and consultant comes, we have to pay the consultant. I just want to make sure there's not something. So I think there was some dialogue too about, I think Commissioner Foster said, what, Kathleen, why can't you just do that? So I just want to make sure that, because that's what I remembered at the end was, well, whether staff could just give you an overview of what the housing element is charged to do without paying a consultant to come in and do it. But I'm happy to ask him to come in. So either or.
It'd be great on April 20th if we could make that happen, because that would be the subject of that whole meeting, really, because that's part of some of your inquiry, as I understand it, is the nature of that housing element, and what do those RENA numbers mean, and are they real, and are they truly a mandate for us to move forward on? Right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think part of the discussion was too, as Kathleen mentioned, I think it was a general overview bit. So I think what we pointed out was that Commissioner Merck, Commissioner Foster, and myself have actually sat through the process of a housing element, and then our newer commissioners had never had a chance to go through those presentations and that process. So it was a general overview to get an understanding of how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference one way or the other?
I do not.
Because I know you guys are,
No,
tons
I
going
do
on
not.
there.
I'm just trying to give you whatever you need for background information and move it forward. And so I just want to make sure that I'm meeting all the expectations is all.
Well,
That's my only concern.
and we can talk, right? I mean, we can talk and fine tune if you have any questions.
Yes, that's
but
fine.
I think we have a good.
Then I would
feel
prefer
for
to
it.
leave it on because, you know, it's here. It just happens to fit real nice and nothing else is ready to go. So it's a good opportunity to spend a couple hours, but normally we feel obligated to move on because there's an applicant we need to help.
Perfect.
So,
That's good.
Yeah. Okay.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Planning Commission committee reports. I don't remember who was where when. We don't have, we sort of
You don't have the
don't have the past. I don't. We're looking for well, we have the future liaison schedule. We don't have who was where when.
So I know today there was a Complete Streets meeting, correct? I think she can, Commissioner Nolan can give on that. Is that what you're wanting to know?
Yeah, or, whoever went to
Right, whoever
city
went to
council or MAC or building appeals.
I believe I was supposed to go to city council, but I ended up in Colorado instead.
I think I was
So-
there, but I don't remember what.
So, yeah, so.
No, it's all, I'm not supposed to. Okay, well, we have Commissioner Nolan can enlighten us on Complete Street.
All right, so we actually have had our monthly meeting today, and I'll just give you kind of a brief overview. Typically, the hot topic for Complete Streets is, safety, and speeding often comes up. So we're hoping, we're going to be working with the police department to look on, in collaboration with monitoring and clocking, on 3 streets that we've identified, Bryant, Kenyatta, and then East Ojai Avenue, kind of in the general vicinity of Whispering Oaks. We're also, I'm just reading through, I didn't have time to type these up or anything. The other item we're looking at is pilot projects where we put up rubber curbs. We're calling them safety islands. And we have 3 areas. This is where the bike trail crosses. And one of them will be on Bryant Street, adjacent to the Hillgers project. The second one on Montgomery Street, I'm aware that there were several members of the public that attended City Council. In addition, I received a letter from a member of the public with concerns about safety and speed on Montgomery. So that's going to be a second pilot project area. And then the third one is on where the bike trail crosses Country Club. Then a third thing we're looking at is actually putting in a 4-way stop the intersection of Aliso and Signal. And the research was done. It's warranted due to the amount of accidents that have been there. There'll be some PR in the neighborhood prior to it going out, so the public's aware. Another one that we added today, another project, is identifying bike hazards. And one that came up was actually the storm drain grates happen to run parallel to the curb in many areas, and in some areas there is no storm grate. And Steve Quillisi, thank you, has decided he'll take that on. And I also wanted to thank all of our members because aside from coming to the monthly meeting, most of them get involved with outside projects or collect data and bring it back to help with Complete Streets. We're also going to make sure when we get our master plan back from the consultant that we include language about hazards in the master plan if we didn't have it there already. Another project is sidewalk infill. And this was actually brought to our, well, it's something we've been talking about since I've been on Complete Street since 2011. But in relation to an in lieu fee, and we had a member of the public that came to City Council and also to Complete Streets in regards to the vacant lot that's on the south side of the Art Center. There's no sidewalk there, and it's a heavily used area because, first of all, the Art Center, there's a lot of events, and that it's hazardous. So we're looking into what we can do as far as the process goes, where we could actually put Whether it's concrete or decomposed granite, that's still to be determined. But where we could get a sidewalk in and somehow work out a relationship for a future development. So I don't have all the answers as to what that's going to be, but we're in the process of exploring that. And then another project that we're actually going to be working on at our next meeting, which will be the May meeting, is this sidewalk infill. So the city actually has a map where all the sidewalks are in town. Complete Streets has we've got a map of streets in the pedestrian enhancement district, which is downtown, and then the primary and secondary corridors where we believe there should be continuous pedestrian access. We're going to kind of put those together, make a list of the streets that may fall under or have lots that need sidewalk infill. And almost done. We cram a lot into our 2-hour meeting. And an update on our master plan. It's still in the hands of Nelson Nygaard, the consultant that was hired by the city. But we expect to get it back sometime in May. We're going to review it as a subcommittee one more time. And then it would be formally brought and agendized to Planning Commission, and we're hoping that that could be a joint Planning Commission meeting and public workshop. But that will be formally agendized through Community Development Department. And then one other exciting recent grant, and thank you, Mr. Quillisi, again for working with Greg Grant on this. They got a TDA grant, and this will be to put in one of the rapid flashing beacons. That's the one that's on Ojai Avenue next to where the library is. That's our first example. But they're going to be putting one in across from Nordoff where Peary and Church Road is. And apparently, I think I got this correct, if there's additional funds left over from that one, they're hoping to do one where Valley, Rio, and Carrillo kind of intersect on Maricopa Highway. And the other topic we discussed was the parking at the museum. And I think that was it. Any questions?
Yeah, Kathleen, what about, was there any discussion about what happens at Kenyatta and Ojai Avenue? Is that, there are people crossing there
Right.
continually, and you got that almost a blind curve there, and it's
Right.
an issue.
So basically, we do that's going to be the second location. Well, let's put it this way. We've in process right now is a rapid flashing beacon to be installed in the vicinity of Whispering Oaks and Ojai Avenue. The second one, and this is on a different grant, will be the Kenyatta crossing. And then the one that I brought up at Nordoff is like a completely separate project, but we just actually got the funding for that also. So basically, there's a series of them. They're kind of on the outside of town. Of course, we wouldn't have them right downtown because of the historic nature and, the arcade and what have you. But yeah, we're constantly working on it. So that one is in the works. And I believe that one may be going under the ATP grant, which actually is about a 3-year project. So I mentioned all these things, but everything, and a lot of it has to go through Caltrans. Yeah. So it takes literally, a year, 18 months to 2 years before we can get it started or installed.
My pet peeve is the speed change. It should change at Bristol. As soon as you get to Bristol, you see that 35, and it should say 25 right there, because they're zipping down that Kenyatta, coming around that corner, and that's what's making that more complicated too. So, that's to me a top priority is to change that.
That's another one we've identified that several years ago, and it used to be actually higher, and that was changed at one point in time, not too many years ago. But once again, it's something we have to work on with Caltrans, and it may, I can't say for sure, but it may be something that we can kind of address in this ATP grant, which is actually a $2.8 million grant that's already been awarded to the city, and it's going to cover a good percent of Ojai Avenue and Maricopa Highway, so like from the Y to the Kuyama 5-point intersection there. So anyway, I'll keep you posted, but if anyone ever has suggestions, of course, give them to me. I'm more than happy to bring them back and keep plugging away.
Walkway lights and slow that speed down.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as anybody else have anything about things they've done. Okay, so in terms of our liaison schedule, I think the city council meeting on the 24th, I think that should probably be the 26th. I think the 24th is a Sunday, so that's one question. Amber, I don't know who's tracking this. Is it?
I didn't do this packet, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, no. But I mean, if I tell you, does that
I'll make sure.
get back? Okay. Okay, so I think April 24th, I don't know, I think that's Sunday. Okay, so that's the 26th. And then I may need to switch with somebody, but maybe Kathleen or Mac, I can speak with you about that. Okay, thanks. And then, has anybody been at the Building Appeals Board since
They haven't had a
January?
meeting.
Okay, so it can't be me then next, because I was at the last one.
Plus that date's wrong, too.
And that date's wrong, too.
No, that date is right.
Oh, it's a special meeting.
Same day as.
Same day
don't
as
we-
our
That's
planning
our
commission.
meeting.
Yeah, they're having it in the morning.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean,
Okay.
afternoon.
So, ouch, but it's not me, because I was at the last one, I think. So,
So we just move it up, so that we.
We'll just move it up. We'll just take you off and just everyone go forward. Like,
sorry, Steve, you're going to go out with a bang.
What would be the anticipated date of that, do we know?
the April
20th.
It's the
20th
20th.
It is, it's in the afternoon.
at 2 o'clock.
And then you can just stay until Planning Commission.
That's the problem for,
Hope we'll be done by 6.
Oh, boy, that's scary. Okay.
Just a suggestion, maybe, what day is that meeting?
April
That's a-
It's the
20th.
same
That's a
day as our
Wednesday.
Planning Commission meeting. That's the problem. We could
Maybe,
skip it.
maybe future Commissioner Quillisi could
Oh,
report on that.
I'm going to be on that side of the table that day.
Is there,
which, this side of the table? By April by April 20th?
no, he's going to be still building appeals, correct?
Yeah.
So what they're saying is that you could report when you then become the commissioner in May.
Let's do that.
I think it makes sense.
I think it really makes sense to Steve.
unless you
Be your
really want to
first
sit at
report.
Okay,
I'll listen to Steve.
okay. And then everybody else can check their dates and whatnot. Okay, so I would call up City Council Liaison Haney, but it looks like it's City Council Liaison Blatz. Rotation changed on that, too? Oh, gotcha. I just wasn't sure we hit that. Okay. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, staff, good evening. Great work again tonight. It did say Councilman Haney, but we rotated, so you've got me for 3 months. Yeah, the Building Appeals Board is actually doing some work as an appeals board on that day. That's what it's all about. And it has to do with the bowling alley property, as I recall, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we have been able to interview for all of the reappointments, or the reappointment, and for the new appointments. The chair and myself and Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick did that last week, or was it the week before? We've made our selections, and then it'll go to the city council, I believe, at Tuesday's meeting, for them to approve our recommendations. So after that, it'll be official. As I heard mentioned earlier, one of our recommendations is Mr. Quillisi, who's in the audience tonight. So we're hoping that everybody gets approved. We have some excellent people. I'm really looking forward to it. And we are recommending, without surprise, the reappointment of Commissioner Merck after 14 years, 16 years, 18 years. Yeah. I was on this commission for 10 years, and John and I were here together, and I've been off it for a long time. And he's still here. So I don't have anything else other than to say thank you. Does anybody have any questions of me? It's always a pleasure for me to be the liaison. I really enjoy it, so thank you. Really appreciate your hard work.
Thank you, Mayor Blatz. Okay, anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.